Okay, let's go to the gaseous fuels, which they can be some of the safest and easiest to use. And when you have safety, you have to understand what I mean by that, because we will talk about all of the issues and the safety issues with each one of these fuels. So when we talk about gaseous, the most common will be propane. These propane cans, these large tanks outside, these propane bottles like this. You also have butane like this, which is one of these others. You don't get as much out of the oil wells as that, so it's a little more expensive. And then you do have the butane, which is primarily used in some of your lighters and some of your other stoves. Um, so that's a nice fuel to use. And one of the reasons it's nice, these little stoves like this, and every now and then when the power goes off and we need to cook something, we just get this little stove out that has this canned heater, this little canned butane right here, plugs in there. And now you can boil some water and cook some things and what have you. You can also have these propane stoves like this that use the bottles. Of course, they may be bigger like this, and they're very easy to use. They're very clean to use, and you can burn this fuel inside. In terms of the vapors that come off of it, they are safe to burn inside because they do not produce copious amounts of the carbon monoxide. Like when we're talking about the white gas stoves like this, or lanterns or stoves, never, 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 never inside because of the carbon monoxide. But my propane lantern like this or my propane stove, I can use that inside because the fumes that come off it are not as deadly. This produces copious amounts of carbon monoxide, which accumulates in the bloodstream. This is producing carbon dioxide, which is hazardous to a point, but it doesn't accumulate in the bloodstream, and so you don't have quite the problem. So, storing of gaseous fuels. Well, here again, they're one of the easiest to deal with because you have these pressurized containers, the tank that's attached to the house, or these bottles like this, or the larger bottles so that you can store that fuel, and it will store indefinitely. That's one of its advantages, as long as that container isn't exposed to a lot of water so that it would rust through, or you don't poke any holes in it, as in shoot it. Then that fuel will store indefinitely. That's one of its great advantages to over the other fuels like the gasolines and some of those. Okay, transferring propane. This is something that you may want to consider doing, and you want to practice it now and be sure that you have the tools because if you do it right, it's a safe thing you can do. If you do it wrong, well, it'll kill you. Simple as that. So let's take one of these bottles and understand I'll say the physiology of this bottle in here. And what you've got is in the bottle, you have liquid propane that's down like in this area. Of course, you can pick up this bottle and you can shake it. And you have a gaseous area that's up here. And it's under pressure. That will keep it a liquid form at a room temperature and above because of the pressure that's in there. Now, you can fill this bottle up where it's almost full to the top. You never want to fill it tight. And that's one of the things. Now, the way these new bottles are designed, you can't fill them to where it's tight in there because they have a little float in here that'll cut off being able to fill it any further. Because if you were to fill this thing up so that it's completely tight, absolutely full with this liquid, then when the temperature goes up, it doesn't have a gas cushion up above that allows it to be, I'll say, the pressure to increase, but and not to be have a water hammer or a lock on it so that that expanding liquid, when it's tight, it can actually rupture this bottle so that you don't want to fill them tight. Now, what happens is, of course, you're using the propane. The liquid propane down here, as you're drawing it off, it's boiling. That's why this bottle gets cold because it's boiling off. And in order for it to boil, you have to absorb heat. So that's why the bottle gets cold on the outside because it's pulling heat out of the environment around it until all of the liquid is gone. And then you just have the gaseous in here. Now, if you would like to be able to fill these bottles, these little 1 pound bottles like this, or fill this tank from a larger one like this, but yeah, since you understand how a bottle is put together, the liquid and the gaseous cushion, if I just take this large propane bottle right here and I have this small propane bottle, I just hook a hose from the top of this one to the top of that one, I'm not going to do much because all I'm going to get is the gas that's going to come off the top of this into this gas area here, and I'm going to get not very much liquid in there. And what you need to understand is that liquid propane is 270 times more, I'll say concentrated. You have 270 times more energy in it over the liquid, over the gaseous, because it's concentrated, it's condensed down into this liquid pool. So if you're just doing it from, the top of one bottle, top of the other, all you're going to get gases, and you won't get very much in that bottle. So what you have to think about is, if you're going to do this, and here again, you've got to do it safely, and you need to practice now if you're going to do it, or know somebody else that can do it for you, because when you open this bottle on the top up here, all you're going to get out is gas. That's what'll come out. Now, if you turn this bottle over, what happens is now the gas is up here and this is liquid down here. And so that's what you're going to want to do is be dealing with the liquid, transferring liquid to liquid rather than the gaseous in there. So if I'm going to fill one of these bottles, what I want to do is the bottle that I'm going to be filling it from, as in this one right here, this large 100-gallon tank, I'm going to turn it upside down so that now I'm drawing liquid off, and I can let that liquid, and notice how I've done this, and I'm doing it inside. And so that's a little bit of a hazard, although I hook up my hoses outside, but I want it inside the house because the house is warm in the winter. This is when you'd most likely be doing it. I'm going to have my bottle outside where it is cold, because I'm trying to take advantage of both the pressure differential and to move the liquid out there. So what I'm going to do to be able to do this is, number one, I don't want to be getting any air into my tank, that I'm going to have air and propane in the tank. So I'm going to take my hose that's tied to my tank, and remember, this is to the liquid side, it's upside down, and I'm going to purge that hose. Now, when you go down and have your tanks filled, you'll notice that those guys will do a little bit of a purge so they don't push any air in that bottle, because you don't want to be collecting air and propane pressurized inside the tank. That's called a bomb. So you're going to purge this out where I see a little bit of this propane vapor coming out, or this liquid coming out. Notice that I have gloves on here. This is where I'm on the inside right here. And then I'm going to take and hook to the top of my bottle this hose that's been purged, and I'll screw it in. But remember, you've got to have gloves on, because when you're doing that, that liquid propane that's coming out that hose, if you spray it on your hands are going to heat it, it's going to vaporize, and you're going to freeze your flesh. It's called a flash freeze. So you don't want to do that. So notice that I have my tank upside down. This hose here at number one goes to this tank outside that can be standing upright, and I'm going to be transferring liquid from this tank, and I'm going to be putting liquid into that tank is what I want to do. And the reason I want to have this tank right side up, these new tanks, is because it actually has a valve, or a float in here on a valve. I can't overfill that tank. I can't fill it up completely with propane, because that's a hazardous thing to do, where it's now going to be heated up and later on, and where I have it solid with the liquid propane, it can burst that tank. So here again, we have this. Now I want to turn this system off. Okay, my tank is now full. You can hear it transferring in there because you hear it vibrating and the noise and everything. So I've transferred my propane into it. It stopped going in there. So now I can close my valves. And what I'm going to do is, at number one, I'll take and I'll close this valve right here. Then out here to my number two valve, I'm going to close my propane tank valve out here, and then I'm going to have to purge that line because it has liquid propane in it. This valve has been closed. My tank inside has been closed. So I loosen this up a little bit. You see all this vapor spraying out here? That'll freeze your hands. That's why I have gloves on to work with it right here, so I don't do that. And then I can, I'm done with my transfer. Now, if you have a big bottle like this, then you'll notice that I have this ring on it to protect the valve. It screws on it up here. Many of the tanks now have these wings on them here, like your smaller tanks do, to protect the valve. If you have a big tank like this that doesn't have that, get one of these for safety reasons, because if I tip this tank over, it can break that valve off and all that propane will escape all at once, and that'd be a problem. The other thing it lets you do is turn the tank upside down so I can transfer my fuels. Now then, I want you to understand is that this is butane. There's no way for you to refuel these little ones right here if you have those. You can do the same kind of a thing to fill these, but you have to be a little more careful about that because they don't have that safety valve in there, and that's why they say these are non-refillable. Well, what you want to do is fill them up until you have 1 pound. So you'd have a scale till I have 1 pound of propane in there, and then I stop my fill operation because these are 1 pound bottles. So I want to put 1 pound in there. So I'm going to measure the weight of filling that bottle. And by the way, the tare weight of the bottle, you weigh the empty bottle first, and then you put it on your scale, and then you zero your scale, and then I fill it till I have 1 pound of propane in there. Do not overfill those bottles. So that may be something you want to think about. Now then, once again, I already mentioned this. These propane stoves work just great in the warmer temperatures, but at 40 below zero, you can't even light this thing. So understand those limits that you have.